Hi, Mama.
Hi.
This whole idea came about me, thinking, doing this podcast was me always wanting to, sit down and, just get things down and, document pretty much your story, and that's what kind of came up with this. It was I was like, I really want to get your story on here, and I was like, well, I could do that with a lot of people, and so this is pretty fun, and your story's so long that we might have to break it up into a couple, but I think it'll be cool. We'll do a couple of them, and I was excited to do this with you.
It's a very long story because I probably won't remember a lot of it, but I think once you start asking or talking about things, then memories will come too, because a lot of times I forget things, but
yeah, of course. I mean, it's been such a long career.
Too long? No, it's not too long yet because I'm still going. That's the good part.
Well, it's an easy question. It's how long has it been? No.
This is 42 years.
42 years, wow.
Yeah, so, at 19, I mean, that's counting the very first tattoo I did, right? So at 19, so 42 years from there. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
I know.
So I'm 43, so I was just a wee baby.
Yeah, you were crawling around on the living room floor while we were doing that.
Yeah, that's funny. And you started in Minneapolis, or was it St. Paul?
In Minneapolis. Yeah, we lived in Minneapolis.
Minnesota. Okay. And, I mean, how did you get into it? Was there someone that kind of inspired you to get into it, or?
Yeah, I'm sure you don't remember this guy, but we used to take you down to the local tattoo shop all the time, and the guy who worked there, his name was Neil Grant, and he ended up moving downstairs from us. So he used to pop up all the time, just friends.
Yeah.
And he started saying, hey, what are you drawing? Oh, that's kind of cool. Eventually that became, maybe you should try this. You might like tattooing. And I was, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But at that time, I was raising you and I wasn't thinking in that direction at all. But your dad was, and he wanted to tattoo. And I'm like, oh, no, I don't want to learn to tattoo. And then eventually it became where I started drawing the stuff on your dad, right? He would go down and get it tattooed, and Neil said, okay, that's it. You just got to try this.
Oh, rad. So you would draw on the drawings, and then he would go get them done by Neil?
Yeah, I would draw it right on his arm with a pen.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was
so he said you got to start doing this, and what happened then? Did you start apprenticing with him, or did you kind of just jump right in?
Jumped in. So being around it so much and having Neil around there so much, it was almost like an apprenticeship because there was already all the equipment, there was already a sterilizer, there was always, everything was already set up and ready to go. So it was basically just put the stencil on, which back then was powder stencil, or drawn on with a pen, right? And then just do it like you would if you were drawing, he said. Just do it like that, So I was doing mostly pencil drawing sketches at the time, pencil or white pencil on black, stuff like that. So I just took the single needle and did that.
Yeah, it's just treated like a pen almost. That's cool. Was there anybody at that time that you were was there a lot of magazines, or was there anybody you were looking at that time, before you even started and get inspired by?
Yeah, so always Ed Hardy, because Ed Hardy was in the magazines. And yeah, there was a few. I don't remember which one specifically, but back then there was just a couple, right? And the first tattoo convention was, I don't remember if it was in 78 or 79, but it was right then. First one that National did. National Tattoo Association, it was right then. So everybody went. I didn't go. I wasn't actually tattooing yet, so I didn't go. And then it was kind of like, okay, Ed Hardy started to learn about Jack, because Jack was just kind of starting out. Him and was working, with Good Time Charlie, kind of doing the black and gray thing. But I didn't see any. I didn't see any of it. Had never seen it. But Neil went. Where did he go? He went to California, and he came back, and he actually got a tattoo by Bob Roberts, which was weird. But Bob did it in a single needle black and gray style.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was like, what the heck is that? You know?
Yeah.
And at the time, I think that was probably one of the only couple he did like that, but it was kind of in Jack style.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was like, ooh, that's pretty
interesting.
cool. You know, and it had the kind of slick back ponytail hair thing, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that whole
Which was-
beatnik kind of thing that they're into.
the
Yeah, yeah.
puffy and the little flip at the bottom, right?
Yeah.
But it was pretty cool, and I saw that right after I did that first tattoo, which was like a little flower about the size of a quarter.
Okay.
A little rose, you know. And I was like, that was kind of fun. You know? It was fun.
That's neat. And then, so you kind of was it just full bore from there? Did you start working at Neil's shop in Minnesota?
I didn't. So I was still, what job was I working? I think I was working at a foundry at the time. I was doing what they call sand core assembly, right?
Okay.
So it's basically like they're creating a carburetor for a F-18 fighter jet.
Oh,
right?
okay.
So what I did was I made the guts of that they pour the metal into.
Oh.
So I was doing that all the time. That was my job. I worked like 10-hour days and did that. And at work, people started seeing that little rose and saying, I want to get one. I want to get one. So, you know, prefacing that is totally the wrong way to learn, but that's the way I did it, you know.
A lot of people did.
Yeah,
but
just did
back
it.
then, especially. So that rose was on you specifically.
No,
you did. Oh,
it was on your dad.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So
Yeah.
that's how they saw it. Okay,
Yeah.
so he was working there as well. I got
Yeah.
it now.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, and then you guys, well, how did you start? Because I know you guys moved to California at some point when I was young, but is that when you actually started working in a shop?
So it kind of led in one tattoo into another to where it was
Okay.
kind of fun. And then it was like, wow, I wonder if I could make a living at this, you know? Neil does it. I wonder how much people make doing this if you can survive, right?
Yeah.
And then we got laid off those jobs. That company just went kaput, you know? They stopped making the F-18 fighter jets and basically got laid off. And it was your grandma lived in California, and she's like, why don't you guys move out, you know? And so we did. We loaded up the U-Haul and trucked it out, and that was in 1980.
Okay.
Yeah, so we trucked it out thinking, oh, we can go out there, maybe we could open a shop. But the idea of that, I guess I got to go back and explain where the idea of that came from, because when I did that first tattoo, Neil liked it so much when it was done that he's like, I have to take you to Dave's house. So Dave's his boss, right? Dave Yerku is who he used to work for in Minneapolis. And so he trucks us out to Dave's house, and Dave's having a family barbecue, right? And he's like, Dave, take a look at this tattoo Kari did. And he, you know, you're a tattoo artist, and somebody who's not supposed to be tattooing shows up at your barbecue, and your tattoo artist is saying, look at this, you know. So he took one look and didn't say a word and kind of turned away and was probably pissed as hell, right?
Yeah.
Pissed as hell.
Yeah.
So I'm like, we leave, and next day, you know, Dave called me, and he's like, okay, sorry about that. He goes, honestly, it was good. You know, it was a good piece. And he goes, I got this guy who's been calling me, and he's looking for somebody to work for them in California.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, Dave, I've done like one tattoo. There's no way I can go work for somebody in California. So, you know, that was in 79. And he told me that Cliff Raven was looking for a tattoo artist.
Cliff Raven.
Cliff
Wow.
Raven. And I was like, I'm like, there's no way, you know?
Yeah.
So that was like a dream then, you know, to go to California and maybe work with Cliff Raven, right? Anyway, so year passes. That's when we got laid off and ended up going to California.
Gotcha.
With
Okay.
that dream. But California is a whole different ballgame than Minnesota. You know, first of all, it's like 3-4 times as expensive.
Yes,
you know?
yes. Still, to this day, it's still, it just gets more and more, but.
Yeah, something that rented for, okay, this is going to date me, a place that rented for a place to live at $200 would be at least double or triple
here
in California.
Wow.
So our rent at the time in Minnesota was $200 for 2 floors. The living room was like 30 by 40. It was massive. We go to California, and the only thing we could find was a little tiny cracker box of an apartment that was $425, without jobs, right?
Yeah,
so it's
without
like,
jobs.
all right, we're gonna do this. But so we, got jobs out there and started trying to make it work there. Still hoping someday to do that.
Yeah.
But.
And so, what shop did you fall into when you came? If you didn't, because you didn't end up at Cliff Ravens.
No.
So, what shop did you end up?
Well, I started drawing that Flash.
Oh, okay, wow.
Right, because I was, we went and visited Jack Rudy and Mike Brown, right?
Yeah.
Over at Good Time Charlie's, and used to go there frequently here and there. And Mike was working one day, and I was asking him about the designs on the wall, like, where do you guys get these? He goes, well, we drew a lot of them, Jack drew these, I drew these, Freddie Negretti drew these, and he goes, but there's places you buy them from. And he goes, like, the supply company, he goes, they sell Flash.
Oh,
and I'm
wow.
like, oh. And he's like, actually, he goes, there's this guy, Ernie Carafa, and he's looking for people to draw Flash. He goes, you should call him, So I did. So I called Ernie, and Ernie's sent me some stuff. So I mailed him a couple of drawings, and he asked me to draw him 28 sheets of Flash. So I started doing that first. And then
that's
after
awesome.
Ernie...
Because that kind of gives you just like Apprentice does. You make them draw like Flash and stuff. That's cool.
Yeah, so I would try... He was paying me $50 a sheet, right? So I was like, okay, I have to draw one of these a day, make that extra money. And then after that, Spalding and Rogers had me do the same thing. So for that length of time, it was like 2 years, probably till 82, and I was drawing that Flash. And I still, at that time, until 82, didn't work at a tattoo shop. It took a couple years.
Oh, okay. That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. And then what was the first shop that you finally fell into one after a couple years?
Yeah. I don't know how I fell into that either. I'm not really sure. But the first one was called Fat George's. It was in La Puente. And I have no idea how I ended up there. I still don't know.
Oh, wow.
I can't remember how I got that job. I know I didn't really go in and apply for it or anything.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was...
How was that working there for the first time? Do you remember your first day?
I don't remember the first day.
Do you have a general idea how the first time went? You working for Fat Tony, and you're in La Puente, and
Fat George.
You're this. Fat George.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Fat George.
okay.
Sorry about that. I think you said Fat Tony, so I went
Did
with
I?
you. Yeah, I
Oh.
think so. I don't know. Maybe I messed that up, but it doesn't
George.
matter. But that's funny. That's a Simpsons character, Fat Tony. So that's where I kind of went to with that. That's funny. But you're working for Fat George, and you're this woman from Minnesota, all of a sudden in La Puente, California, tattooing.
Yeah.
What was that like, being in that shop? Was there a lot of other artists and stuff, and what was the vibe like?
The vibe was crazy, because all tattoo shops were at the time. But especially in La Puente, It's not a soft, easy neighborhood, So it was kind of hard. The clients were hard and tough, and, sometimes there'd be, the gang guys would come in, or... I remember one time I was tattooing, and... I was tattooing on I think I was working on a girl, or somebody else in the shop was working on this girl. And this guy came in, and he was threatening somebody in the shop, and the girl was like, oh, hell no. She jumped out of the tattoo seat, fresh tattoo going on, jumps out of the seat, grabs a baseball bat, and goes running down the street after the guy.
Wow.
Right? And it was a while later, she comes back and she says, I took care of that. And there's blood on the baseball bat, and I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And
it's a whole new ballgame for making. Yeah, they're making parts for F-18s.
Yeah, it was a whole new ballgame. Yeah, and Fat Mike used to work there. That's the guy he worked for next.
Oh wow.
And he worked there, and he actually one time was tattooing, and I remember. And this was really new in the shop, because I remember a girl walking through the shop. I didn't know the girl, right?
Uh-huh.
And one of the guys getting tattooed smacked her on the butt, right? And Mike was tattooing the guy at the time, and he pulled the machine out of his hand and he stuck it in his neck and just held it there.
Whoa.
And he's just like, right? And he goes, that's for smacking my wife's ass.
Wow.
And then
it's
he
his
went
wife.
back to the tattoo, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, God. You know, like, what kind of place am I in here, you know?
Yeah,
But
the old days.
that's what it was like in the old days. you know?
Wow, that's amazing. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Was there any other female tattoo artists in that shop?
No.
No. At that time, was there any, like, do you remember, because you're in this business that's pretty male dominated, and was there anybody, like, that you looked, like, around this time, were they starting to pop up more female tattoo artists? And if so, like, who were you looking at that time, you know?
They did start popping up. You know, right around 82, that's when I went to my first convention, was just a few months after this. And Vivine Lazonga was there.
Oh,
and
yeah.
she was really big at the time, you know, so she was a big female figure. And Jamie Summers, who wasn't at that convention that I'm aware of, but she was apprenticed under Ed Hardy.
Oh.
And she was doing really great stuff. It was really different. And I remember seeing this tattoo she did. It was, you know, you're talking early 80s. So
Yeah.
back then it was like leopard, like grass on the woman's ankles, and then it went up into leopard spots and kind of went up her body and formed like a shape down her upper back and kind of down her arms and stuff.
Yeah, cool.
Nobody's ever done anything like that. It's
Yeah.
all like free flowing designs and stuff like that. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. She was
That is
really
cool.
cool. But she,
Well, Ed Hardy and all them, like, really introduced, from what I gathered looking at tattoo magazines, you know, as I grew up, is that he kind of introduced, like, the art to it. When it was an art already, but it was very biker, you know, and very sailor, you know, which due respect to all that, you know, of course, it's all really good stuff. And, but just like this abstract art kind of style came in all of a sudden that was really neat, you know, that I saw Ed Hardy in him. So her being apprenticed by him shows a lot why she was doing stuff like that.
yeah, it's interesting because he apprenticed a lot of women, you know, and I wasn't aware of that, you know, but he was really welcoming to that. And Mike Malone was also very welcoming to that. And a couple of old-timer tattoo artists, too, like Charlie Wagner taught a lot of women way back in the day, right? So, not a lot, you know, for that time, but he taught a few, I
Yeah.
think. And so, yeah, Ed, you know, studied a lot of Japanese art, but he kind of took that art and said, okay, I'm going to do my own thing with it.
Yes.
You know, which was really fabulous because it had a great flow, had an amazing color. It was really unique. It was very much Ed and nobody else, you know.
Yeah.
And so him coming around was definitely a big change for the industry.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And he
Yeah.
was open to all these different styles, you know, as it wasn't just like traditional, you know, which it
Yes.
pretty much had been. But then all of a sudden, yeah, there's this black and gray stuff coming around, and he's like, wait a minute, what is this, you know? So
Yeah, and I remember seeing a lot of his early work, and it's very, like, mixed styles a lot. You
Yeah.
know? Like, he would throw, like, tribal stuff with black and gray or whatever, you know, realism and, like, all these different aspects.
yeah, so stuff that's new now was new then. So like
Yes.
Jack would, you know, for instance, he did this one piece that was really well known. It was like a, you know, kind of his own style of traditional Japanese tiger, for instance, but then he threw like black checkers in the background, checkerboards,
Yes, I
you know,
remember that.
different, not standard tribal patterns, but black or contrasting style to it, and he put those together.
Yeah, almost like a graphic illustrator or something.
Yeah,
That's
and
cool.
now it's a big thing again.
Yes.
You know, it's a big
Just
thing.
like everything
Yeah.
cycles around. Just like 80s clothes, 80s tattoos are back.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's pretty cool that.
Yeah, it all cycles
Yeah.
back, and it just changes a little bit. You know, so that's kind of what happened with.
That's really
with
cool.
Ed. Yeah.
And that, working at that shop, was there, so when you left there, how long were you there?
Not long. I
Oh,
was,
okay.
First of all, I was only working weekends because I still had my regular
Day job.
there. Yeah, I
Yeah.
had my day job, so it was weekends. And then I worked Fat Mike. We ended up moving homes, so ended up kind of going from like I don't remember where we lived at the time, but maybe Anaheim, or Riverside, and we ended up moving to San Bernardino.
Oh, okay.
Right, so Mike did the same, and he ended up opening a shop there, so we ended up working with him for a little bit. So between the two of them, it was probably a few months before the Queen Mary convention.
Oh, okay.
And that was a really huge, big deal, that convention.
Yeah, that was 83, right?
It was 82.
82.
Yeah, that was 82. I don't remember the year or the month, but...
I have a poster of that somewhere.
Yeah.
And it had the big Queen Mary on
Right.
it.
Right.
It was really cool.
Yeah, so Greg Irons was there.
He drew the poster too, right?
Yeah. Which was, his style was so amazing. You know, I kind of miss that he's not tattooing anymore, because he took his graphic comic book style and put it in tattoos. And that was new too, because nobody had done that yet. You know, so he came up with that snap crackly water and snap crackly fire and, you know, all that kind of stuff, which was really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
which I always saw that you adapted a little bit of
I did,
that.
yeah.
I
absolutely
that's what's
did.
great, you know? Like,
Yeah, I remember sitting down to tattoo sometimes. This is after Greg passed, right? And I don't know if I'm sure other people do this, but I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I need some help on this. You know, I need some help. I got to do a Greg Iron style tattoo. So I would subconsciously kind of ask him for help.
wow,
You know?
Yeah.
Like, you know, channel me.
Yes.
Help channel yourself through me. Help me out. Help me do this. You know. So that developed into my water style and my flame style.
That's really cool.
Kind of where that came from is,
Wow.
you know, not trying to take from him, but develop from it.
Yes,
You know?
yeah.
Make change. So yeah, that's where that happened.
Well, a lot of artists will say like, I forgot who said this, but it's a great line. It's like, I didn't steal from one person, I stole from everybody.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of pick up stuff from
Yeah.
everybody, and I even seem to, like, when I get tattooed by somebody, I somehow get a little of their mojo over to my side, you know? Like, you just want a little of that, and you get energized off of it, like, so I could see that happening, being around all those great artists, you know, and that you were around.
Yeah, that
That's-
convention was the jump start of that, really. You know, that's when my Flash came out, and I didn't know it was coming out.
What was the shop called that you were at in San Bernardino?
It was
you
called
mo-
Purdue Tattoo.
Purdue Tattoo.
Yeah.
Is it still there?
I don't know. Maybe.
Probably not. We probably would have heard about it
I know that, you know, Fat Mike has passed, Fat George has
Yeah.
passed. They're both gone. I don't know if their shops are still around and have a different name or not. I'm not
Wow.
sure. But
Okay.
yeah, Purdue Tattoo.
And then from so you do this convention, and I mean, it's just, yeah, it's like one of the first ones in this area, right?
Correct.
And did you, after that, open the shop, your first shop? Was that right after that, or
Pretty-
did it take some time?
It took a little time, but not much. So at that convention, we ran into different people, met new people. We met this guy named Tim Dutton. He was a fairly new tattoo artist, but he really wanted to open a shop, and we started, you know, not new, maybe he had been tattooing like 5 years, something like that. And we were like, wow, we should do it together, you know, just blindly. Don't even know the guy really, but he was so sweet and such a nice guy. So we decided to do that and started looking for a location. But looking for a location back then was really difficult, you know, because you can't just go down to your local place and rent a place. Nobody wants a tattoo shop in their center. And
Yeah.
you also have a respectful amount of distance between each tattoo shop.
Yes, yeah, that's changed a lot since then.
Changed
for
a
sure.
lot. So at the time, you know, it should be at least 25, 30 miles from another shop. Give everybody a little buffer of clientele zone, right?
Yeah.
So that was the thing, like, where are there no shops, you know, where could we put it? And then we looked up at maps and looked at populations of cities,
Oh,
you
nice.
know, to kind of see, like, which cities that aren't populated had the biggest population. And that happened to be Anaheim. Anaheim,
Wow.
you know, had Disneyland, and it had a huge population at the time compared to all the surrounding cities. It wasn't LA, where there's already a shop. There was a shop in Santa Ana, you know, so it was kind of the pocket,
Yeah.
right? And there was one tiny little shop there with one guy. So we talked to the guy, and he's like, oh, I'm fine, I don't care, you know.
Oh,
and we're
cool.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
so okay, so we started looking in Anaheim, and we found this building on Beach and Ball, and we called the landlord, and he's like, yeah, what do you want to put in there? And so we tried to make it sound all fancy.
Yes,
You know,
yeah, yeah.
And we told
Art
him,
studio.
yeah, we told him monochromatic realist work.
Oh, cool.
He's like, oh God, what is that?
Yeah, yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
What does that mean in layman's terms? And so we told him it's tattoo shop. He goes, oh, sure, fine.
Wow.
Yeah, we were just lucky.
Yeah, you just lucked
Super
out.
lucky, because it was on Beach Boulevard. Beach Boulevard at the time was the main street everybody took to get to the beach.
Yes.
You know, so when we opened there, most of our clientele was people coming from the beach, tourists, you know, things of that nature, swimsuits, all that. Even though we were up a ways from the beach, the cities that were closer to the beach didn't allow any tattooing.
Oh, okay.
So we were the closest one to the beach.
That's
at the
awesome.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
And that is crazy because it isn't that close to the beach, but relative, like now, you know, when you drive up, it seems so far. Back then, it probably didn't.
Plus, there wasn't that much traffic then,
Yeah.
you know, so it was a pretty smooth shot.
But you had Knott's Berry Farm right there. You had Disneyland, all that.
Right.
Shout out to Tito's Tacos.
Yeah. I know.
In the center there.
Yeah, Tito's Tacos was
Yeah.
a big draw. Then they put the El Pollo Loco in front of us. You know, that was a bummer.
yeah, that was a bummer. That's funny.
Yeah.
And so you guys finally get this place, and then how did you go about, like, naming it, first of all? You know, obviously I know the name, Twilight Fantasy Tattoo.
Yeah, Twilight Fantasy. I don't know. It sounded, I don't remember who came up with the name, but at the time it was like, ooh, that sounds cool.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
I mean, it was the 80s, so it was
totally.
now it's like, oh my God, what did we do that for? That was
but
a
everything
horrible
around then, the music industry, everything was very, like, mystical and fantasy kind of stuff, so that makes sense.
Fairies,
you know, Dungeons,
wizards,
Dragons,
unicorn, Pegasus,
all that
dragons,
stuff.
right, so it fit, you know.
Yeah,
so,
that's cool.
Yeah.
And then who, because I remember it was very wood, like, it had, like, paneling on the wall and wicker chairs and all that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, who did that? Was that my dad or was that you? That kind of like,
so when
you guys both have hands in on decorating it.
So first, when we took this space over, we had a total of $5,000 to do the whole shop, right? So when we went into the shop, it used to be a jewelry store. And that blue carpet was already there, and that paneling was already there.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah, so, and that hole in the wall was already there because they used to, like, sell jewelry through there or do jewelry repair.
It was perfectly set up.
It was perfectly set up. You didn't need plumbing at the time. All you needed was a bathroom. So it had that. So all we did was have to put in the furniture and add a couple countertops for people to work on and throw some storage cabinets in the back, right?
Yeah.
So those metal kind,
I remember those, yeah.
Yeah, so the idea of the wicker chair and all of that came because every shop we had ever visited or been into seemed really dirty and grungy.
Yeah.
So I was like, why do we have to do it like that? You know,
Yeah, because they're run by pirates.
So I didn't want to do that. That wasn't me. So we took things from home and decorated it that way. And so that's why we got the wicker chair, and you know, we had a play area, you know, when we first opened up, because you were coming down every day, first of all. So we had this whole like little fenced off wicker, what do you call it, picket fence area.
Yeah.
And we had a bunch of toys in there, and we had, you know, picket fence. Could you imagine?
Yeah, picket fence in the
sectioning
middle
off your kids' area with a picket fence? Now you'd be so in trouble, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, we put all these toys in there, and you'd come down, and every time people would come, they'd bring their kids, and you guys would all play together in that area. You know, we had coloring books and a little table and, you know, all that stuff. So you guys were always busy, you know, doing things. So kept yourself pretty occupied.
Keep us busy while you're tattooing people.
Yeah, because, I mean, you, at the time we opened that shop, let's see, you were 83?
Okay.
No, 4 or 5, somewhere in there.
Maybe going on 5.
I think you were just about, just edging 5.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's pretty neat to hear that too. Like with the wood and the daycare thing. I don't remember that little part of it at all.
Right.
Yeah, I remember the chairs and all that, but some of that atmosphere is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And you know, like it brings me back to a memory too of we have these pictures of you tattooing with no gloves on.
That's right.
So when did that, you know, which is just crazy and wild to see that people tattoo without gloves at some point, you know, and when did that come about? When did people start wearing latex, or not even latex, gloves, period? I don't know.
Gloves, period.
Yeah.
So it's actually me. So
so you were the first one.
I'm the one. So I used to work every day, and I'd have to stop, and I'd be wiping that blood off my hands, and I hated it.
And the ointment.
So I'd constantly like spray a towel and wiping it off. And one day I just said, I'm gonna run down to the drugstore and see if they sell like gloves like the doctors wear, because then I don't have to wipe this stuff off my hands all the time, you know? So I found a box of gloves and I tried it and I'm like, this is amazing. This is great, right?
Wow.
And I'm tattooing with my gloves on that first day and everybody's like, what are you doing? And then I'm like, oh, I have another idea. I'm going to put a baggie over my spray bottle, right? So I don't have to wash it.
Oh.
You know? Because, you know, in between tattoos, you're
level.
You're trying to go fast, right? At that time, it's like all about do it well, but do it fast. There's people waiting. You got to get to the next person. So at the time, it wasn't about, sanitary reasons.
Yeah.
It was basically like, okay, I'm going to peel that thing off, put another one on, and I can get to my next client.
Yeah.
Boom, right?
Yeah.
Didn't think about having to wash it too. That came later, that came later. So I started covering everything with baggies, and at the time we didn't use like paper cups or plastic or any of that. We had a metal stainless steel bowl.
I remember that bowl.
Yeah. So what we would do is we would spritz it with alcohol and throw a fire in there.
Oh, burn it out.
Burn it out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So we just burned it out and then refilled it with water and went,
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. It was kind of nice that way because it was faster and thought it was cleaner, than just wiping it out,
That's pretty cool.
There was some tattoo artists at the time, one guy in particular who we went to visit. I won't mention the city just in case, but he had like a 10-gallon fish tank next to his station, and he would be tattooing and he would just reach over and rinse it in that water. There was no fish in it, granted, just rinse it, go back. But every client, every tattoo, burn.
Yeah.
So this thing was like gross, and I'm like, okay, we got to make some
old
changes,
days.
Yeah. Got to make some changes. So, yeah, gloves, I'm the first one, and then I went to a convention, I don't remember the next, 85. I think it was 85, because I started wearing gloves 84, right? And I went to the convention, and everybody's like, what are you doing? If you do that, we're all going to have to do that.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So a lot of the old timers were like, Kari, okay, do whatever you want in your shop, but don't do it here. Don't do it at the convention because then we're all going to have to do that shit, and that's going to really suck.
Was there a health department at this time that would come through the conventions?
There was a
Or
health
not
department,
yet?
but they didn't go to the conventions.
They didn't really care about that.
No.
Well, yeah, I'm sure there's a health, but like they didn't not like they do now where they
didn't do anything.
Yeah, okay.
They didn't do anything at all, even at the shops. They you didn't have any. There was a list of regulations that nobody even knew what was on it, or
Oh, wow.
nobody did anything with that. So
Yeah.
I mean, you were supposed to have a sterilizer, but I'd say 99.9% of tattoo shops had a sterilizer that was rusted shut or never worked. They'd just say, oh, yeah, we have one. It's right
Yeah.
there. It's right there. Or they'd use a hot dog warmer. They had dry heat sterilizers, which was
Yeah.
basically like they'd warm their lunch in there, and, oh, yeah, our sterilizer's right there.
Oh, that's
so
amazing.
It was a bummer because, at that time and prior to that, sterile needles, things like that didn't really exist until around that time we started sterilizing needles, right? But people still would use them till they were dull, and they didn't sterilize them every time. They were sterilizing. I'm telling all these bad things about tattooing, but we're alive. We made it.
Yeah.
Right? But
yeah.
But the thing is that they would use those needles till they would just make people bleed so bad they couldn't use them anymore.
Yeah.
So that's what I came from. You just used them till you couldn't. And I was like, I think we should change these once in a while.
Yeah.
But it was still only once in a while. We never thought it was necessary to do it every tattoo.
Totally.
So that took a year or so,
Wow.
before we started making new needles for every tattoo. That took a little bit of time.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And then even like going back to your shop, when you first opened it, was it just you in there, or was it this partner?
Tim
Dutton, and then was there any other artists, or was it just you two?
There was another guy. So when we started opening and talking about opening it, we were like, gosh, what if we vote on stuff and we comes to a standstill?
Oh.
Because, it was vote against vote, right? So we decided to take in another guy, and we met this guy named Rick Rockwood, right? He has a shop now in Big Island, Hawaii, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we took him in, and it didn't go great because Rick was one of the guys who just, we had to set down guidelines and rules, and he would break one, and then we'd talk to him, and he'd break the next one, and we'd talk to him, we'd break the next one. And it's like, okay, Rick, we love you, but I don't think this is working out.
Yeah,
Yeah. So we ended up buying Rick's portion out, right? And then after a little bit of time, I don't remember the timeline, but then finally I started getting so busy, we bought out Tim.
Oh, okay.
And then Tim just kept working for us. And that was really great. He was a really good guy. I really liked him a lot.
That's cool.
I don't know where he's doing now or where he's at. But
at that point when you started getting really busy, were you already getting in magazines and stuff at this time?
So I don't remember. I think the first introduction to being in something published was my Flash, was in '82.
Okay.
Right? So yeah, right after that, when I started tattooing, it was mostly about the Flash. And then I went to the Seattle convention in 1985. And that's when they had competitions at that time, draw Flash, enter stuff. So I entered my first sheet, and I won my first award there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, at Seattle in 1985.
1985, Seattle. And that was Nationals?
Yeah.
The National Tattoo.
Yeah. So
That's
then I was
cool.
like, oh, this is cool. And I also got to tattoo Paul Rogers.
At that same time?
At that same convention.
Wow, yeah, which is huge.
It was really huge. Getting to know him and getting to tattoo him. I tattooed a portrait of his cat on his chest, like fishing in a fishbowl, trying to get the goldfish,
And I remember this too. Well, for people that don't know either, that Paul Rogers is like, the godfather of building machines and everything.
Right, exactly. They call him the grandfather of tattooing. So
Yeah.
there's a few people they call that.
Yeah, they're obviously everybody. Yeah, there's a lot of those kind of people.
But he was that man, and along with Sailor Jerry.
Yes.
But Paul Rogers.
Didn't he just have like a major surgery or something? Wasn't it before you tattooed him?
He was healed, but he did have a pacemaker put in.
Oh, okay.
So when he came to get tattooed, he's like, watch out from a pacemaker. I'm like, you have a pacemaker in there? And I'm like, I've never tattooed anybody with it. I haven't tattooed much in the first place, but I've never tattooed anybody with a pacemaker.
Yeah.
But as a joke, I drew a little sketch of like mechanics, gears running and stuff, and I don't remember what I wrote on it, but I taped it to his chest. It was on the other side.
Oh, okay.
So we flipped the design because I didn't want to put it on top, and then I hung a little thing over his little scar with a little picture on it of his gears working,
That's
So
cool.
that
There
was
is a
cute.
picture of that somewhere.
Yeah, there is somewhere.
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever paid attention to the part. I don't know if you can see it in the picture, but I do remember
Yeah.
there's something hanging over
piece
the
of
other
paper.
side.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't remember if you could actually see what it is.
Right.
But that is great. Yeah, so
Yeah.
you tattooed him at Seattle.
Yeah,
Wow.
and the other thing that happened there's a lot of good artists there, but Horiyoshi, Ed Hardy brought Horiyoshi over. So this is a different Horiyoshi, right? Different prior to Horiyoshi 3, right?
Oh,
so
okay.
this is a different family. And for years I thought it was the same family, and I kept getting them confused, and somebody recently in the last 5 years or so corrected me that this is a different family.
Okay.
Anyway, he brought this artist over, first time to the United States to see an American tattoo convention, and he was watching me, so I was tattooing Paul, and I'm right here and his face was right there, I was like, and he's like hands behind his back, watching me very carefully and asking me what kind of needles I'm using, what setups, all that kind of thing. And he's like, oh, we don't use that, through the translator is telling me they don't use that, and women don't tattoo in my country,
Yeah.
So he was very interested, and he watched a lot, and it was fun, kind of in a way, although it was a little nerve-wracking because then Ed had to be there too, and
And he has a translator, so it's a lot going on.
And I remember I was tattooing Paul, and Ed asked me a question, right? And I have a tendency to I brace myself with my pinky so I know where I'm at, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm shading, and he asked me a question, and I looked up, and I was still doing this, right? And he's like, Kari, what are you doing? You know who you're tattooing there? He's like, don't look away,
Yeah, that's
like,
funny.
don't look away. And
Because I do that too.
yeah, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, so I'm trying, then I have to stop every time, every
Yeah,
question,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And kind of answer the question. So I never forget Ed's face, like horrified, at me like stopping and not recognizing how important it was to keep looking at what you're doing,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. But it was just accidental. I mean, it was just habit.
Yeah, you're doing cat hair.
Yeah.
Like cat hair. You can sit there for a while and look around the room. That is funny. You can't do that. I've done that before too. Just in sections, you're just like, what? And you just turn away because you're so confident in what you're doing. It's no big deal, That is funny. That is pretty funny.
I always joke about my naive confidence as a kid, because, when I was young, art-wise, when you're a kid, you think you can do anything.
Yes.
You just do. You don't know any better, So it was like, oh, I can do that. Oh, why can't I do that? People would come in the shop and want a certain thing. Oh, I want a portrait. Okay, I think I can do that. And I would just do it. I would just try it. And that was early. That was in first shop, probably, what year was that? Probably 82 I did my first portrait. And we didn't have, all the things to do the photos and all that stuff then.
Yeah.
So I had to set the person there and draw it on the skin and then tattoo it from the pen.
Wow.
And I said, whoa, that took way too long afterwards. From now on, I got to take a photo or something and work off the photo. Cause trying to get them to hold still. That was the first time I'd ever done it. It was nerve-wracking.
That does sound nerve-wracking to do it that way.
Yeah, it was totally nerve-wracking.
Yeah. It's crazy. I didn't know that you did it that way. That's pretty awesome.
Just once.
Yeah, just once.
Just once. That was done. Yeah.
Because I've seen artists do it now, and I've seen Robert Hernandez do it and stuff, but I'm like, oh, that's pretty wild,
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I don't recommend that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too stressful, What if you get the nose a little wrong or something, then you're totally screwed,
Yeah,
so,
that's wild. Yeah. And then that Seattle convention, was that the one that kind of broke a lot of things open for you more? Because I'm sure the magazines were there. You win in awards. You won one award there, or just a couple, or
just one?
Yeah, for the Flash, and then that's where things start to steamroll a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So I started really thinking, wow, this is kind of cool, because they take your picture, they put you in the, what do they call that when the newsletter comes out monthly from National, and you're in the newsletter, so every tattoo artist who belongs to National Tattoo Association convention sees your work, sees that you won something. So I started entering every year. They used to only have that one convention a year, So it was basically you prepped all year to enter your thing the next year.
Yeah, that's wild how it used to be like that.
Yeah,
I remember that. I remember you guys prepping everything, getting it ready, these photos, because you used to enter photos.
Yeah, there was some things you'd enter as photo, like if you did cover up, for instance, you would enter it as a photo. So you'd take the before and then the stages and then the after, and then we'd have them all framed up, matted, really nice, and so the presentation was really cool, right?
Yes.
And we did that. Flash sheets, same thing. You do your 11 by 14, and then we'd have them framed. So there was black and white, color, best cover up. They had, trying to remember what other ones you actually entered as a photo. And then they had the live competitions too, where you'd have to get your people to go. You got to get them to travel there.
Yes, which is a big deal.
Fly across the country and walk on stage. It's it's not like drive down to Anaheim from Westminster.
Yeah,
it's
you got to fly these people out physically. Yeah.
Yeah.
And back then, that was that's a big thing too. I remember. You kind of developed an entourage of people that would travel with you.
Yeah, there was a group of people I regularly tattooed for years. Tracy. And Pat Renzi, and a bunch of clients who were getting a lot of large, big work at the time, and they would go to the conventions regularly.
Yeah,
that was pretty cool.
When did you really start getting into the bigger work? Was it before that Seattle convention? Did you start doing back pieces and stuff, or did that convention kind of open you up to start doing bigger stuff too, or were you probably already doing it?
It's funny because I wasn't sure when you asked that, but now I think back to the Queen Mary convention in '82, and one of the I want to say his name is Peter Eagle. He was a tattoo artist from the East Coast. And he sat down in my chair at that convention, my very first convention, and had me do almost a half a back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was pretty much right away.
That's cool.
Yeah.
He was right out the gate.
He was smoking a cigar the whole time. And, you know, he was a very known, very wealthy tattoo artist.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you know, he had a
From
big,
the East Coast.
Yeah, back then it was all about, when you go to the convention, I want people to know I'm doing well, so I'm going to flash my wares. You know?
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they would wear their biggest jewelry and their, you know, we had a banquet every year, and the women would all mostly dress up, you know.
I remember that.
Yeah,
yes.
and the men would too, and they would wear suits, you know, and they'd wear their big rings, you know, and their fancy gold and all that, you know. Everybody wore as much as they could to show that their shop was doing well.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's so different now, you know.
It is. And we don't even really have those banquets now either, which were really cool. I remember seeing those growing up, all those National Tattoo Association books, and they would have all the pictures from the banquets. Yeah, so I'd see you in there all dressed up and stuff. And I always liked the section of like when you get up on stage when you're like been tattooing 20 years, or I've been tattooing 30 years. And I remember like going to my first national tattoo convention and being there, and they did one of those, and I'm like, oh, maybe one day I'll be able to get up there, you know what I mean? But now they're not really around, so I kind of missed my opportunity by the time I had enough years to like want to do that. You know, it's such a simple thing, but you saw everybody else do it. It's like, oh wow, like, you know, these badasses would get up and line up. Oh, I've been tattooing 20 years, you know, at that point, and that's pretty cool, you know.
I never got to get up there either.
Oh, really?
No.
So you never even did that part yet?
I didn't get that far.
Wow,
no, and
crazy.
I had the dream, because there was that group of people who get up there and they'd been tattooing 40 years, right?
Yes.
And I'm like, 40 years. I'm like, who tattoos? Who does something for 40 years?
Yeah.
I was like, there's no way. 40 years. Who does the same job for 40 years? I was like, don't most people retire after 20, 25 years? But there was this group of tattoo artists every year, 40 years, 30 years, like you said, and you're like, just like, wow.
One day I'll get up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. Because, by the time I did my first national convention, you'd kind of already stopped doing them. So you could have got up there, but you were kind of over it by then, you know? And they kind of fizzled out, too, as an association. You know, you really didn't need that anymore to be something, because new conventions and everything were popping up, so
everywhere.
It was like, so it started changing things. Yeah,
what happened was I don't remember why, but I had to take 1 year off going to a convention. I don't remember the reason, or something. I couldn't get to this one show, but at National, you held your booth, and if you skipped a year, right, then somebody else got your spot.
Okay.
Right, so the next year was one that I helped host with Jack Rudy. It was in Anaheim, and I couldn't get a booth.
Oh, wow.
Right? And I was like...
And you were a host.
Yeah. I couldn't get a booth. And I was like, this is terrible.
Yeah.
You know? And I just didn't go after that. And I, you know, at this time in my life, I feel bad about that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, making that decision to not keep going, you know? And I didn't go as much. You know, the other conventions started coming around, and... there was a period of time where I actually didn't go to conventions for a while. I kind of needed a break. You know, there was so much hard work. Conventions at the time. You know, not only the tattooing, but the prep and prepping your work you're going to do, prepping your drawings, prepping everything. You know, that whole thing was such a lot of work.
Lining up people to go enter, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's a really hard thing.
Yeah.
It takes a lot.
It's very consuming, so I'm like, I'm taking a break.
Yeah, that's cool. And then around then too, so the shop's going in Anaheim, and things start to develop and stuff. I personally know some of this stuff, but maybe other people don't. But then new shops started popping up into town. Started getting busy, Anaheim, like for tattooing. It started becoming kind of a big mecca, you know.
Yeah,
but,
well,
you know,
I think Jack Rudy, Good Time Charlie opened up, you know, because they lost this. I don't remember the whole situation right offhand, but the space in East LA, you know, Ed didn't want to hold that spot anymore, I believe, and I don't think that Jack wanted to buy it, if I remember correctly. I'm just saying if I remember correctly to make sure. But so anyway, he ended up in Anaheim, which was maybe a half a mile away.
Yeah.
So Jack was there, we were there. It started bringing a lot of people to the area.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and then eventually, wasn't it Autumn Moon? Oh yeah, Autumn Moon
was there.
Opened up over closer to Disneyland.
Who was that at Autumn Moon? Is it Donovan?
Yeah, Donovan. Yeah.
What's his full name? Is it? It's escaping me right now, but this is something
too.
I should know. But yeah, they were all kind of right there because he wasn't too far either from Jackson.
No, he was kind of just a few miles closer. He was really close. He was on Harbor over there, closer to Disneyland, just down the street a bit. So you had 3 really good shops running.
Yeah.
At that time, and then more and
Did
more.
everybody get along well?
No, absolutely not. So
Yeah,
it was always something that I admired about San Francisco, by the way, because
that's funny. This came up the other day with Lior when I did a podcast with them. Is that their whole group is unique,
tight. Simply tight, all friends, all got along. Everybody works, everybody does great. Everybody helped each other. And down here, it wasn't like that. It wasn't. Everybody was trying to be better. Everybody didn't like the other person. Everybody was competitive.
Yeah.
It took a while for that to fizzle out.
Yeah.
Even though we would act cordial most of the time, you really didn't want them there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
honestly,
totally.
just saying it honestly, that tattoo shops, they didn't want somebody else in their neighborhood. It was too close. They felt like it was competition.
Yes.
Even though it never was. And you look
Yeah.
back now, and I can honestly say it never was. Like, Jack being there never hurt me. Me being there never hurt Jack.
Yes, yeah.
Never. They were always busy. We were always busy. Autumn Moon came in. They were always busy.
Yeah. There was enough clients for everybody.
Everybody gets their own following, too.
That too.
Styles
the
are
styles, attitude, whatever. Yeah. Because, there was a feud with you guys for a long time. Everything's good now. You know, we love Jack, and he was always an amazing dude. But there was always some kind of problem there. But it was cool to see it outgrow itself.
Yeah.
And everybody got over that. Do you think at that time, too, was there anything of, like, you being a woman in this business, did that ever come up a lot with you, like with at conventions and things early on, and was there things like that?
So it did come up, but only with certain people. There was certain people who just were old school male, and the majority of them were at the time European.
Oh wow.
They weren't comfortable, the ones who spoke to me anyway, weren't comfortable with women tattoo artists. They didn't feel it was right.
Oh.
And that grew out and fizzled out fairly quickly, but I'm sure there's still people who feel that way.
Yeah.
Some of the old timers. And it was just the way it had been for so many years. It was male dominated.
Yes.
So there isn't a lot of history before, I'm gonna say,
like hardcore males too.
Yeah.
Like hard-ass dudes.
Right.
That's what's pretty different about tattooers today and then.
Right. And, even way back in the day, you're talking about these guys who dealt with military every day, and that wasn't, although military people are very respected, they're also very hardcore, and the tattoo artists who tattoo them were even more so.
Yes, because they had to deal with them.
Yeah.
A lot of these dudes come in drunk.
Yeah.
Drunk sailors and shit.
Yeah. You're talking gun under the counter kind of shops, all the time, or in the back of your pants or whatever. That's how it was. And it was, those tattoo artists were very strong and very hardcore. So females coming in, it was kind of different. It was like, oh God, we got to deal with this. We can't have our boy talk in the shop.
Yes.
And a lot of women I've talked to over the years have talked about when they started, like Vivine, for instance. Vivine is the first female in the United States to own her own shop.
Oh, wow.
So she opened her shop in 1979, and she was the first girl to do that in her own place. And she said prior to that, and Cindy Ray, they talk about how they were just the girl in the corner. They got the last tattoos. They were, basically, however you want to put it, they were just there for eye candy. They were there for whatever, whatever the reason was. They didn't have any importance in the shop. They weren't allowed to talk about the rules or be involved in the shop talk or any of that.
Wow.
So
yeah.
it was different.
It is a lot different.
And I wasn't aware of that because when we opened the shop, it was basically like, even though there was guys in the shop, I didn't feel that.
Oh, that's great.
I mean, it was our shop.
Yeah, so
but
that had
still,
a little bit to do with it.
Yeah, I'm sure that had a little bit to do with it. But the guys who worked there didn't have those feelings.
Yeah, and if they came with you to work, then they're pretty much over that.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, as you started, like, getting really good and things started, like, turning around, like, winning all these awards and stuff, did that change at all, or did that people become more accepting because of that? Because I know that you worked your ass off to become through and break through that barrier of all those dudes winning everything and stuff. Did it start changing? It. Yeah, you just ignored it. Cool. That's good. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think you broke a lot of things open for female tattoo artists today, and I don't know if a lot of them even know it. And what I see a lot of things going on now. Some of them are they're really great artists, but they're eye candy as well. And so. Do you think at all that takes away from anything at all? Or, if they're so badass and they're doing modeling and stuff too, and people are going to them to get tattooed because of that too, does that, like... So
this is a big issue, and I've recently had this discussion with some girls who are younger and very beautiful, and I think it depends on the person.
Yeah.
Because, all people are different. And these women that I was speaking with, they don't let that affect them at all. They do their business. They're very strong personality-wise.
Yeah.
And they don't take any crap about it. Do they look beautiful? Do they pose that way? Yes, right? But do they feel intimidated by guys because of it? Absolutely not. But on the reverse side of that, there's a lot of young girls out there who are taken advantage of because of that.
Yes, I see what you're saying.
And they may not be aware or feel they have to use that to get into the business, or they think that's the way they're supposed to be, or they don't know any better. There's a big mix,
Yeah,
so,
and that's what's crazy is some of them are so good.
They're amazing.
And maybe they're just confident in their body and they want to do all that, and I know some dudes will just go get tattooed because of that, and some are going just for the art because they're amazing, and I don't want to... Yeah, I don't want to sound weird, and I'm sure that there's dudes in the business now that are like, oh, she only gets clients because, she wears a mini skirt while she's tattooing them and her boobs are hanging out, and it's just
sure.
like, the
guys are going to always say that. But,
yes, there's always going to be those, but I think they're breaking through a bit now.
Those women are, let's, put two women doing the exact same work next to each other, one dressed that way, one not. The one who is dressed that way is going to get some guys because of that. But that said, she's still doing amazing work, and in her right needs to be awarded for that.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And recognized for what she's doing, no matter how she dresses.
Yeah, and she's just confident to dress that way, and she's so confident with it herself that she can just do that. And
absolutely.
Like, look at me, I'm kicking ass, so it doesn't matter what the hell I'm wearing.
Yeah, F you. Because I'm doing badass tattoos, and I'm doing my best I can do, and how I choose to dress is my choice.
Yeah. And they probably get dudes drooling over them. They're like, all right, I know I'm charging you to the minute, maybe a little more. you know? But it is cool to see just the business now has just changed so much, and it's just crazy to see like back then how it was with women. There wasn't that many tattoo artists. I kind of saw it start developing just as a kid, being around, just seeing more and more women, being introduced to them, and seeing these powerful women come up in the business alongside all the guys, and just like changing the whole game of it was really cool.
Yeah, that era when I started, right before me, there's several women who started in 78, 79, a ton of them, All of a sudden there's a handful of girls all tattooing, Julie Moon.
Yes,
popped up.
Amazing.
Judy Parker.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to miss in my head.
Of course, it's hard to remember everybody.
I'm not going to remember
We're
all
dropping
of
a lot of names.
because I have done talks where I've mentioned them all in chronological order.
Yeah.
Right? And it's amazing to look at the change that started at the 70s. And maybe that's all of a sudden the flower children of the 60s, and then the strength of the people in the 70s started to change, and women started to come of their own. Started to become recognizably, I'm important too.
Yes, yeah.
Right? So that started. For me, it wasn't like that. I just didn't know any different, and I just liked it. I just did
you're just
it.
having fun doing your job.
Yeah.
And just kicking ass. Yeah.
I never had anybody tell me before that I couldn't do it as a girl. My dad never told me, girls do this, boys do this. That never happened. So for me, it was really great to just develop myself as I wanted to.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas a lot of women growing up, they're raised like, oh, here, you gotta play with that doll. You're not allowed to do this.
Yes.
And then when it came to their chosen profession, it was basically like, no, guys do that, that's a man's job. Women do this, So that happened to a lot of them, and then it started to change.
Yeah.
And the 70s and then the 80s, there's all of a sudden so many because of tattoo conventions. And all the wives and girlfriends, and people started seeing, I'm not going to say just wives and girlfriends, but they started seeing these tattoo magazines coming out, and they're like, I want to do it.
Yes, they get inspired by seeing other women do it in there.
Yep, I'm going to do
Especially successful women that are, beating the dudes, and I'm sure there was a bunch of guys you upset by beating so many people all the time. Like, I mean, back then you had there was a time where you were reigning supreme.
I did great.
That I remember, maybe I'm biased.
I was really lucky. I did really well.
Yeah.
I was fortunate, let's put it that way. And I don't know if it was just because of the time I came up,
Yeah.
Because
maybe the timing, or no, it had to be talent too, because you weren't doing doing things that changed. Just
it was different. Yeah. It was different than what most people were doing.
Yes.
I just did my own thing, what felt natural, but it was different than tattoos had been. And we talked about Ed, and Ed was doing a lot of bringing his natural style into things, right?
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah, but still was much different than what I started doing. So I always loved doing animals at that time. I did a ton of animals, so I started doing color animals, and I started doing them realistic.
Yeah.
Color realism.
First color realism stuff. Yeah.
So I started doing that. My first portrait I did was color, and that was in 82, I think. And, granted, it didn't hold up that good over years, It didn't hold well. A lot of the color fell out. But I started looking at photos of, let's say, I'm just going to say a ram, right? And you would see, on the edges, there's like, a blue glow or a little bit of gold or yellow in the fur. So I started putting all that color in there, trying to make it pop out differently. And it was actually Ed who told me one time, he was looking at my portfolio. We brought it in and embarrassingly showed him my portfolio, and he's like, these are the best animals I've ever seen. And that was at the time, and I was like, ooh, I'm doing something right.
Yeah.
But then he flipped a few more pages, and he's like, that right there sucks. Right?
Yeah.
Bluntly, that right there sucks. You got to fix that, And so going home, all I could think about was that negative part of that one tattoo, right? That I had to go back and figure out how to change, But
he's got a powerful aura.
Yeah.
Ed Hardy does. Because even now, when I try to go up to him, talk to him, it's I shut down.
He's soft.
He is.
But he's strong, right? So he's got this gentleness about him. But inside it's completely different.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I'm not talking mean.
I could just think,
he's
when I talk to him, it feels like he can see right through any of my bullshit that I'm about to say. So I'm like, so I just clam up. But he's like a very important figure in tattooed, so I'm always like, hey, Kari Barba's kid, So it's just funny,
Totally.
Around that time too, because I was going to bring up Ed too, because you were saying about how he took Japanese and kind of added his own thing, and I always felt that was one thing that you did really well that changed the game on Japanese work. I think even more so than he did is take Japanese and to a totally different new level of that no one ever seen anymore. And so seeing that stuff, I could see where you you took his stuff and ran with it, and became another level of it.
You know what I did? It wasn't like thinking about Ed or that style. It was basically like I didn't do Japanese style, but people wanted Japanese work, so I did
I got it.
self.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you want a samurai. Okay, let me look at some real samurais and draw them, and that's just what came out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I started trying to, I started this thing where I got a Polaroid camera, right? The one where the
yeah,
right? So that's what we had. So I took people and I made them get into these weird positions, and I would take a photo of it, and then I would draw from that Polaroid. And that's how all those back pieces and all that stuff was put together.
That's so rad.
Yeah. That's how I did it.
Yeah, just make your own reference.
I had an idea, and I'm like, okay, I need you to do this. I need you to do this. And I'd snap the photo, I'd sketch it, and then I need like on Pat Renzi's back. I don't know if you've ever seen his from way back, but he wanted clowns all sitting around a campfire, camping, and I'm like, okay, I need you to sit here, and I need you to sit there, and I need you, and I take this photo, and then I dress them in clown outfits.
Rad.
Same thing with the Japanese stuff. So I need you to lean back, girl, hold your hair like that, and then we're gonna make you a geisha, right?
Yeah.
I just make it up. Look at the clothes in the book, reference books we had, and try to draw it on them that way.
Wow, yeah, that's neat. Yeah, I see artists doing that now too. Again, like Matt Jordan and stuff.
You're right. He's doing photos.
To pose some people. I'm
Yeah,
I remember
posing
when my
people.
mom used to do that. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, but now they've set up a whole lighting thing, and
Well, there's a lot more stuff available now than there used to be.
there's a lot more
There's
available.
real cameras now and stuff too.
Yeah, now I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, God, that was a lot of work.
Yeah.
A lot of extra time, a lot of prep.
I think that extra time is what made the pieces good, though.
You're right.
And was there was there anything around around that time when things started happening? What was the piece that like broke it open, or is there a favorite piece from just that little section of the era that like kind of like to you broke it open, maybe, or one that like maybe the magazines took and ran with and they broke it open?
I think there's a few, because I would try to enter like 3 or 4 back pieces in a year, all at the same convention.
Okay.
Maybe that wasn't the smartest because they had to compete against each other. Then I realized later.
Yeah.
But we know Tracy Whitman. Tracy is a client who's become a good friend.
He's basically my older brother now.
Yeah. You grew up with him. So he came to me at 18, got his first tattoo across his chest, and then his next thing he wanted was his whole back, right? And I'm like, okay. So that's one of those pieces where it's like, I want a charging samurai. We came up with the idea. We even have his portrait on the pants.
I remember that
as part of the pattern in the clothes.
The samurai's clothes.
Yeah, stuff like that. And Tracy was one of those. Then there was.
But that, for people who don't know either, that was the piece. It was a samurai fighting an octopus.
Right.
And if you knew tattoo magazines back then, it was
a
lot of full pages.
That one got photographed a lot.
You did.
And
because he was very willing to travel too, from what I remember. He traveled with you guys a lot, him and his group of friends, because he was friends with all those guys too, they would all get tattooed and go. It was like
and another tattoo artist we ended up having work in the shop, he had worked a couple years, Dan Weaver. So his back piece was the one that was the samurai, that was not the samurai, the geisha who was kind of falling back and the water was rushing.
Yeah, it was like 2 geishas, right? One had like stabbed the other one.
Yeah, and she was in the distance, so I started also trying to focus on levels of foreground, background, middle ground, so I would have something always really close up and large, and then something behind that at the next level, and then behind that. And I started doing things like taking that very back level and making it like dulled down or blue-gray.
And I remember it in that piece.
To make it look more distant, totally I would blur it, right? Things like that. I started doing that, and that would make that forward piece stand out more. And then I started doing different line weights, so I was doing like, bold lines on the front, and then inside a little smaller, and then back here a little smaller, and back there nothing.
Yes.
You know, so it would kind of disappear. So
And that was a cool one too, because it, you know, Japanese tattooing, so basically like stories and like a lot of gods and like stories. It's very like cut into that. Like
Right.
you don't really stray out of that traditional Japanese tattooing. But
right.
What seemed like you were doing was like creating your own stories.
Yeah, exactly. I was
Yeah.
like, maybe I don't remember, but maybe because I didn't know those stories.
Yeah. Well, that makes
Possibly.
sense. I mean,
But so I was like, oh yeah, we could have her doing this and doing that. We
and
would
Japanese
make it
culture
up.
stuff was really big then.
It was huge.
Yeah.
We used to go down to L.A. all the time, you know, to Japantown and go to, I want to say Kuniyoshi. I don't remember if that's the name of the bookstore, but it was like dig and dig and dig and dig for reference, you know, to the point where you're just trying to find books nobody else has, you know.
For those references that nobody else
Yeah,
has.
nobody
yeah.
else has.
I remember
you
you
know?
guys bringing suitcases home
Yeah.
of books, and we had like a library. Some of those books are in this room now.
They are.
Some of them are in here.
I
yeah.
walked in and I recognized some of
Some
them.
of
I'm
them.
like, ooh, I haven't seen that in a long time.
Yeah, I still have a
Yeah.
couple boxes of them in the thing, but it's
Yeah.
like slowly over the years they've kind of trickled down. They were in the shop too, a couple of your shops.
Yeah.
We had some books in there for a while, but
Yeah.
as Google became bigger,
Yeah, then the
And
internet
just-
started, right?
yeah,
And nobody
but-
touched the books anymore. And I'm like, oh, you know, it's sad. But
every once in a while though, I'll open them up still, and I'll still find references that I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to find this on the internet.
no, they're amazing.
You know, like, there's a lot of original stuff in
Yeah,
there.
you got to
know?
get into the paper. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. That's cool. So, like, Tracy's back for sure, the octopus one, and then, yes, definitely Dan Weaver's. I
Dan
remember
Weaver.
those were ones that really set
It
it
was
out.
Mike, this guy named Mike. He got a tiger fighting a dragon.
Yes,
That
one of
was
my favorites,
That was
yeah.
around the same time.
And I do remember that one having a lot of
Oh, and
line weight.
yeah,
Because the
thick line weight.
Yeah, thick line weight. I never really seen a tiger done that way before.
Hmm.
I mean, I still like. I guess I had like I was young, but that tiger was just a little bit different than all the other tigers. It's kind of graphic but realistic.
Yeah,
with,
right.
Like thick line work. It had a really cool style to it.
I'm remembering names. It's weird because I have the worst memory, but
But they're all popping back.
yeah.
And hopefully some of them are still around and listen to this.
Yeah,
and
some
they're
of
like,
these
oh
guys.
yeah.
I'm trying to remember the first back piece I ever did. I remember his name was Mike.
You know, I remember that back piece. It was a picture of him and his wife.
Yeah, and I cannot remember his last name right now.
Oh yeah, but it was like they were entangled in like a hug.
Yeah.
And there was like water. And,
Flowers.
yeah, flowers and
right.
water and
First
stuff.
one I ever did, yeah.
That's cool.
So I outlined the whole back piece in 3 hours, you
Wow.
know, and I'm like, how did I ever do that?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. You were a beast back then, though.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great.
Yeah, you're much faster.
Then there was a point too where you got pregnant with my sister, Nakia,
Mm-hmm.
and you had to tattoo. You worked through that whole pregnancy,
I
right?
sure did. Yeah, and that was my armrest. You know,
Nice. Yeah, your
right?
belly. Yeah.
So I would, you know, rest their arm. Like if I was working on their arm, I'd just rest it on the
Yeah.
top of my stomach. And I worked up until the day before, because it was C-section, so it was scheduled. And I worked until the day before I went in, and I went back to work 5 days later.
What a trooper.
Yeah. No, what is wrong
It's
with
just
me?
like these old tattoo artists. You're gonna be like, until
Yeah.
last day. You know.
I know, it's like,
that's
God.
how. It seems like this is a business where like there isn't too much retirement. Like I know a couple that have retired,
Yeah.
but most of them are still kind of going. You know, like or maybe they just
Yeah.
don't tattoo as much and.
Yeah, there's a combo of reasons, you know. First of all, it's the love for it, you know, and you're comfortable. You know, you love doing it. And then there's the business side. You know, we don't have 401ks. We don't have pension plans. We don't have medical.
Yes.
You know, so people in this business have to fend for themselves. They have to make their own living in every way. You know, nobody's giving that assistance of like, oh, if you put in 3%, I'm going to match that.
Yes,
You know, they don't
yes.
have that kind of thing. So people go longer for that reason also. But still, luckily
true
that we
artists
love
in
it.
that way.
Yeah, but that we do love it too, you know, because if you didn't love it, you'd stop and go work at Starbucks or something.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And I'm sure you're like any other artist, you get sometimes where you're, you know, you go through little spurts of like not loving it as much as You know what I mean? Because I know I go through that personally. So, and when you're doing something for 42 years, there's got to be levels, highs and lows, you know. And do you feel you're in a high right now?
I feel good right now. I do. I'm enjoying it. There's definitely been times when I was like, maybe I should stop. You know, I don't feel like I'm growing. Some days you go in and you're like, I hate it. You know, I hate it. I'm burnt. My body hurts so much I can't move. You know, those moments where you're just like, what am I doing? You know, you leave, and you know, I've seen people sitting next to me just pick up their tattoo machines because their hand hurts so bad and throw it on the floor. I'm done. You know, break it, right?
Yeah.
Break it, kick it across the floor. You know, and walk in the next day with splints, braces, all this stuff. You know, I've seen a lot of hand surgeries, back surgeries, neck surgeries. You know, and a lot of those people had to quit because of those reasons.
Yes.
You know, so over all these years, I've kind of realized that part of the helpful cure to that part is to figure out opposite ways to move. You know, so right now I haven't been doing this very much. I've been kind of in a couple-week leg, but I try to do yoga and try to do things that help my body move differently.
Oh, yes.
So I don't get stuck, you know. Although I'm stuck anyway.
yeah,
it
you're
helps a
already
little
stuck.
bit. Yeah, I'm stuck.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
As we readjust.
Because the chairs are just so, that's funny.
Tattooers have the worst backs and necks in the world.
Yes.
Hand issues, you know.
Yeah, a lot of issues for it, you know.
Yeah.
I can't complain, though, because I'm not digging ditches, so I'm sure they got bad backs, too.
That's probably worse.
We all get, I think anything you do for that long,
yeah, they work hard, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of jobs where people work hard.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And we work hard in a different way mentally, and I think it's a lot of mental, and you get a lot put on you as an artist, like as far as being in the chair with somebody.
Absolutely.
Sometimes people can put all of their energy on you, like a psychiatrist, basically, like, you know, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, you know, and I that's a hard weight to carry sometimes. To mentally forget about that sometimes is pretty hard, you know. Not saying it's all bad, but, you know, it's just like, you know, everybody's different.
There's those days, you know, like if you think back, you know, somebody loses a child, right?
Yeah.
They're there within days and they want the portrait, and their emotion is still there, you know, and you take in every ounce of that emotion, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and it's honestly true. They don't even have to talk. And you feel everything, and you start getting sad, and you start getting, you know, all of that happens. And then there's the opposite of that. Oh, I just got married. I'm so happy.
Yeah, you're right. The two extremes of everything.
And so then you're like all upbeat because they're so happy, and you know. Yeah, that it's definitely true. And you know, every single person, you know, through the course of all those years, those emotions, and it's very exhausting.
It is.
You know, as much as sometimes it's so pleasurable and you want to help them and give to them, but you go home drained.
Yes,
right?
A different kind of drained. Yeah. It's a very physical. It's a hard to talk drained.
Yeah.
Like, I just can't talk right now. Yeah, it's a weird one for sure.
I heard this the other day. I thought it was great. So, I heard somebody on the radio say, "You ever have those days where you get in the car, and first of all, you just sit there for a minute, and then you just drive home. You don't even turn on the radio. You don't think about anything. You just drive because it's the only quiet time you have."
Yes, very true. Very true.
And I thought, God, that is so me. I'd get in the car, and I don't want to play the music. That's just my thinking, processing, quiet time.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's very true, though, because I do that sometimes.
I do too.
After a rough day and stuff, like, it is hard. Yeah, that's wild to think about too, because it's so true. That's cool. Now back to like Twilight Fantasy too. Like, you know, that was a pretty good run for a while. It was Twilight Fantasy in Anaheim, and then you guys eventually, we were living in Anaheim and we moved to Riverside, and then you guys opened up Twilight Fantasy in Riverside too.
Yes.
So you had two shops going all of a sudden. Did you find that harder to run both shops, or was it? Because I don't know if there was a lot of shops at that time doing a couple shops.
I don't think there was. There wasn't. not the East Coast. You know, some of those
Yeah.
guys back in the East Coast in the day had like one guy had like 12 shops. You
Oh
know?
wow, crazy.
So, but
Was that
yeah.
hard to do? Balance both?
yeah, also because I was working both shops. So I was, working part-time in one shop half the week and then the other time in the other shop. Much harder nowadays because
Yeah.
there's a lot more involved now. So back then it was basically just the work and the clients. There wasn't all this medical stuff you had to worry about and all the business stuff and all that. So back then it was just, I'm going to do my art here this day and do my art here this day, and then you worked with different people. And when you're working with different people, you always have personality differences, so you run across some people that aren't as easy to work with.
Yeah.
It's always going to be that way.
Yeah.
And but
You want to name names? I'm just kidding.
let me get out my list. I'm kidding.
No.
No, overall, most of them were great.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Most of them were great.
I
but
think they all contributed in their own ways.
Absolutely. And whether it ended negatively or not, we had great times with every single one of them and learned things from every single one of them. And I don't hold a single grudge right now on any of them because it just became wasted energy.
Yes.
Right? There's no reason, right?
Yeah,
So just
yeah.
let it go, right?
You have
Let
to.
it go. Yeah, there's no reason.
You can't carry around that baggage.
But the thing I used to do that was always a problem with 2 shops, with 3 shops, 4 shops, whatever, is I'd have my set clients here and my set clients here, and then I'd show up over there, and this person accidentally booked at the wrong shop, and their reference is at the other shop.
Oh, wow.
Right? So that used to
Yeah.
happen a lot, and I'd be like, oh, crap, I forgot your stuff. It's at the other shop. So I started making files, and I would hand each client the file, bring this to your next appointment.
Oh, that's, yeah. That's
and
better.
then they'd forget it.
Oh, funny.
Right? So that was my biggest problem. And I finally was like, I am losing too many days.
Yeah.
I got to stay at one shop or the other. So that's when I finally decided to just work one location and just have the other shops and not work those.
Yeah, because at one point, well, I guess that was later on, you
Yeah.
ended up having 4.
Yeah.
And I guess, because there was a point where the split happened, and the divorce between you and my dad, and then the shops, you got Anaheim and he got Riverside.
So we had 3 shops at that time.
Oh, you did?
Because there was Melrose.
Oh, that's right. I forget about Melrose Tattoo.
Yeah, so what happened was...
well, actually, let's touch on that first.
Yeah.
When did Melrose come into play? Because I remember you guys diving into Melrose. Was Riverside before that or after?
Riverside was first.
Okay, and then
Yeah.
Melrose, you guys started
Yeah.
kind of becoming Hollywood all of a sudden.
Yeah. It was weird because I would only go there one day a week, right?
Yeah.
But for a while there, we had all girls working there.
What was that place called?
Melrose Tattoo.
So it was just Melrose Tattoo. It never
Yeah.
adopted the Twilight Fantasy
No,
name.
no, it didn't. And we wanted to keep it separate and didn't want it to be... We didn't have that shop for very long.
Yeah,
It was way too much of a trek to go down there. But it was really fun working there for that period of time because, Hollywood comes with perks.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
You meet people and you get to tattoo people you normally might not get to tattoo, right? Because they're comfortable walking in the shop, And some of those people would come in and say, don't tell anybody I'm getting this. Don't use my name ever. Don't tell anybody.
Oh, wow.
So
like famous people you're talking
yeah.
about. Wow.
So I still don't tell people except for in private.
Wow, really? You don't want
I
to drop
haven't.
no bombshells now?
It's hard, because
yeah,
I
but
feel...
some of these guys are so old now that it probably wouldn't matter.
I don't know.
Maybe their careers have fallen off.
There's one gentleman in particular that I have devotedly not told anybody since Melrose,
Oh, wow.
right?
Yeah.
And every time I see him on TV, I'm like, God, I wish I could see him again.
Oh, cool.
Super nice guy.
Wow.
I absolutely enjoyed tattooing him a lot. He was a lot of fun. I tattooed him at his house, tattooed his wife, and had a great time doing that.
Wow.
And
I remember when I was a kid and you tattooed Tattoo from Fantasy. Or no, you tattooed his
wife.
His wife.
Yeah.
But it's Tattoo from Fantasy Island.
Yeah, Hervé Villachet.
Yes.
And I tattooed his wife. I did her whole back, and he would come to every single appointment.
Oh,
he
that's
became
amazing.
a very good
Yeah,
friend.
he did. I remember
he was
him
around
coming-
all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
He used to come over the house and hang out all the time, and he was super sweet. And rest in peace to him.
Yeah. And some other stars I remember too. I do remember you tattooing David Lee Roth.
Yeah.
That was pretty interesting because me and my friend were at home, and I'm like, well, let's drive down there and see this. I'm like 14 without
Yeah.
a license, and I drive down to the shop on
I didn't know that.
a motorcycle that I pretty much stole from
Borrowed,
you.
yeah.
Borrowed, whatever.
Borrowed.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it went back home.
Yeah,
But yeah, I
yeah.
borrowed it. Yeah, that is a
Borrowed
better
it.
term.
Yeah.
And we come down and we're watching him. He's struggling bad, which
Yeah.
was really funny. Yeah, because, and
Because
everybody...
he's a karate master,
Yeah,
or whatever
yeah.
his martial art was. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And it's funny because he was having a hard time, but everybody brought stuff for him to sign, and I remember I brought the first Van Halen CD, and everybody else brought David Lee Roth stuff because he'd already left Van Halen, so I felt like the idiot. But it was great because we're in the back waiting, and we're reading a Beavis and Butthead comic book, and like half the comic book is making fun of David Lee Roth.
But what?
And it was just really funny that he's out in the other room getting tattooed.
Oh, funny.
And and since then now he's like pretty bodysuited up.
Yeah, I know.
And he's selling like tattooed products or whatever that
Yeah,
is.
I heard that,
but,
and I don't think I did his first tattoo. I don't think I was the first one. But I got to do a pretty good size calf piece,
Yeah.
But then the style he's getting now is completely different than that.
Yeah, completely traditional Japanese hand poke, a lot of it.
Right.
All that.
And the tattoo he got at the time was kind of symbolizing his life. So he had the dragon wrapping. I don't know how I remember these things.
I
all of a
remember
sudden.
that too.
But he got a dragon. It was wrapping around. There was like New York in the background. There was a lake or a pond and Huckleberry Finn fishing and starry sky kind of thing is what I
Yes.
remember. And, because that was his favorite childhood book, and he's from New York and representing his martial art. And I thought that was pretty cool the way he put it together,
Yeah. You used to get a lot of, which is weird, and it's kind of how I fell into that whole line of music too, which is,
Yeah.
and it is Tracy and all these people that would hang out with you. You used to get a lot of punk rock people
Tons.
coming in. I mean, the 80s was punk rock to the max, but for some reason Anaheim was like a big hub of it. And
it was huge. I tattooed so many bands at the time.
I know, and that's
Yeah.
what's wild. I remember
Yeah.
you tattooing like John Joseph from the Cro-Mags,
Yeah.
Harley from the
Harley,
Cro-Mags.
yeah. A lot of them I
Exploited.
Exploited.
DI,
Yes.
or Adolescents at the time. I don't know which
I did
band
one
that
on
was.
Fred Durst way back in the day, too.
I remember that too.
Um,
I met him years later too at Paul Booth's shop.
Some of these guys are getting bummed. I can't remember their things right now. but
Yeah,
you
and it's hard to remember them all.
Anthrax guys.
Anthrax, yeah, which was really cool too. I
see.
remember that. There's actually a pretty like in the metal scene. There's a video of them down in Huntington Beach, and they're doing an interview, and they have the bandages on.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And so
That's
I saw
cool.
this years later, and then put two and two together.
Oh, that's cool.
And meeting Scotty and way later, and
Yeah.
Charlie Benante. I don't know how to say his last name, but he's the drummer. But meeting them later backstage at a Slayer show, got to approach him and be like, "Hey, my mom tattooed you this many years ago," and that was pretty cool too. So that was funny. But most of these bands I ended up like talking to later and be like, "Hey,
Yeah, then
And
you became the guy who went to all the concerts, It was funny.
to all
because-
these people you tattooed."
Yeah, and I did. I went to a lot of them at the time,
Which was
but
pretty wild to think about now. Like didn't you go to like a Cro-Max show?
I sure did.
Yeah, that's
I
pretty wild to
absolutely
think
did.
about. Like how crazy of a band that was at that time.
It was totally
and how
crazy.
wild those shows were.
Yeah, there
To
was
just
a lot of
imagine
them, but
you're
I
there.
definitely had to stay back out of the middle, because the
Yeah.
mosh pit and everything going on was a little much for me. So I would always I was either more backstage or I would be in a seat, like they would get me a seat, But I would always bring some people along, and there was always people who wanted to go.
Yeah,
Everybody always wanted to go, too.
so fun.
Yeah,
that's
so
cool.
many of those.
Yeah, was there any other? I mean, there's quite a few stars. I guess we don't really need to name the whole list. Like,
No.
I guess it's kind of interesting, but
Yeah.
we can get to that. Like, but with Melrose, I mean, did that just like fall apart? Just became too hard, and so did you guys sell it, or I can't remember what happened to it.
It got during the separation, the divorce time. There's 3 shops, right? So it was one of us take one take the other. We sell the third. So Melrose was the furthest away. So that's the one we sold.
Oh,
So at the time, we weren't sure about doing this, but we actually sold that to a client.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Pat.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Now I remember.
Pat Renzi bought that shop. So I had pretty much fully tattooed Pat. You know, he was so much into this industry, and he wasn't a tattoo artist, but he was tattoo family.
Yeah, and
he went to
everybody knew
every
him.
convention, you know, everything. So
And people don't know, too, like his tattoo you tattooed on him was like a really pretty famous tattoo, and it was the side of his head, and you did the Three Stooges, like a realistic portrait of the Three Stooges on the side of his head.
Yeah.
And it was in a lot of magazines.
it was in everything. I actually got contacted by Warner Brothers. They wanted to sue me for putting that design on his head, for not having copyright to use it.
Wow.
There's a lot of things. He was also the one, he's got like the beginning of the clown era.
Yeah.
So Pat was totally into clowns, and I did the first half skull, half clown on his belly with the green hair going out either side. So that was the first big clown tattoo.
Yeah, it's like green hair one side, orange on the other. I totally remember that tattoo.
Yeah, it was skull on one side.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the beginning of the clowns, and that was all his ideas.
Yeah, clowns got really popular.
Huge clowns after that.
Yeah, that is wild to think about that. Yeah, I forgot that you sold that to him. That's really cool. And so then after the divorce, you decided you had to rename the shop, and then it became...
Yeah, what happened was we started having complications because they both had the same name. They had different owners. He was running his shop totally different than I was running this one, and we started thinking we needed to change the name, because what if people are thinking bad about something that happened there? We don't want them to think it's affiliated.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so we went to the artists who were working at the time, and we had them all write down the name that they wanted the shop to be, right? Because I didn't know what to name it.
Yeah.
And at the time, this is in the 90s, so we started redecorating the shop at that time too, and it was very industrial. You know, all the shops back then had a theme. Remember, they all had
I do. You changed themes quite a few times. Right before that, it was more like 80s.
Yeah, it was 80s.
Or like
beachy
teal colors.
It was beachy. It had the water splashes going on the wall.
Oh,
right,
yeah,
all
that's
that.
Right. It had like airbrushing on the walls and all that.
And
that's
I airbrushed it.
Yeah, that's cool.
I didn't really airbrush much, but it had all those geometric designs and the water splashing through them.
That's right.
So we switched from that, and we made it
very industrial.
Corrugated metal walls, razor wire. We had aliens on the wall. Remember the alien painting was donated by...
it was beautiful. It was really cool.
Can't remember the artist's name. I'm terrible about that. Anyway, can't remember the artist's name. I apologize for that. But it was
But it was
great.
a lot of steel and like industrial, like
welded
metal pieces,
divider walls. And so when they did the names, they were thinking about the decor and all of that, and my life and what I had been through. And Sean Humiston, who was an artist at the time, said Outer Limits. And it seemed to fit, right? Seemed to fit. It fit everything we had decorated, the way we had done it. So we put a TV in the front room. We started showing Outer Limits TV programs all the time. We play them constantly on VCR. We'd play one, we'd play another, and it was all Outer Limits playing all the time.
That's great, and that name coming from him makes so much sense because he was so big into that kind of stuff and aliens and everything. Yeah, that's cool.
All the aliens. So that's where the name came from.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. And then the whole shop changed as a whole, like into this whole new style of shop with the, like you're saying, the look of it, the name of it.
Right.
Even the people there. I mean, most of them stayed. They were all there. You know, Paul Black was there for years before that, and Sean and all them.
I think Paul started in '89.
And you apprenticed him?
Paul Black, yeah. And he worked with us until he worked with you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that long. It was a long time, like 26 years or something.
Yeah.
It was a long time.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and now he's back in West Virginia? No, North Carolina. North Carolina.
Yeah, and he's still tattooing and still ripping. Still
doing great.
Yeah. There was such a strong crew around them because that's when I started like really hanging around the shop more.
Yeah.
And being around that, you know, because I watched from afar from a long time because I wasn't really allowed to go to the tattoo conventions because they were a little wild.
Yeah.
And so when I was young, I didn't really get to go. I remember going to like the Anaheim one that you're talking about. I believe it was that one. It might have been a later one actually. But like I had to have like the neighbors like drove me and my friends down there. I was really young, just to visit for 2 hours.
I think it was Anaheim.
It was Anaheim, but I don't believe it was the one that you hosted with Jack Rudy. I think it was a later one.
I think that was 91.
Yeah. It was a later one that was like more, might have been Tattoo Tour too.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't a...
There was a tattoo tour there.
Yeah, I don't think it was Nationals, you know.
Right.
I think this was right when Tattoo Tour started, because that became another big convention as well.
Huge.
Yeah, and which was great because the other day I talked to Lior about the first convention I had flown to was Miami in 98. Or was it 98? I believe it was 98. Miami Tattoo Tour.
Okay.
Which was just a really crazy experience for me. I was 19. I had only been tattooing for a couple months, and you were there.
I was.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Linda Lee Tobin was with us,
okay.
and Miss Mickey.
Right.
And Vinny was with me as well, my buddy Vinny, and we... Just meeting all those people there was just crazy. That was the first time I had the full tattoo convention experience.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I
got wild, you know, like it was like they never ID'd us the whole time.
Yeah.
You know, like so you got two 19-year-olds like drinking everything like for the first time. I remember getting sick as hell and
tattoo convention.
Yeah, you know, and then meeting all the French guys, Tintin and all of them were there, and it was just a really cool experience, but that whole time was just really big, and all the people that worked there and being able to like start coming around the shop and learning. Like I wasn't learning how to tattoo, but I was just hanging out and learning about life from these guys, you know, which was kind of weird too because half of them were pretty crazy.
Yeah, a lot of these guys.
But you had Bill Carlson too.
Yeah, they kind of became your family.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
Some of my clients did, and who are still your best of friends, you know, and Bill.
Yeah, they used to pick me up from school and bring me to the shop.
Yeah, Bill and Ed and Tracy and Pat and all those guys that were around all the time, and you know, still. Bill and Ed having their shop in Big Bear now.
Big Bear Tattoo.
Big Bear Tattoo, right? And Tracy, you know, and you hang out all the time. You're like, you know, like you said, he's like your big brother. And
but it was cool to see the art change around then in the shop. And it seemed like Outer Limits really... It's weird that it all coincided around the same time. Like the name change, the look of the shop, the artists there, all like... started blossoming in this new way in the 90s.
It was huge.
It started becoming 90s style tattooing. It all of a sudden changed a little bit. And even yourself, it seemed like your work got this influence of kind of what other people were doing, like the San Francisco guys we mentioned, like really started doing some new things around then. And that started like, and Guy, and I mean, a lot of people don't know, like Guy Itchison, you tattooed Guy.
I did, but the first time I met Guy was at a convention. I think it was probably Chicago because that's close to where he's from.
Yeah.
And I remember he was very young. He showed up at a convention and he was the new kid, and he was walking around with, he'd been tattooing like 6 months, and he had done an outline on probably a friend, right? And he's like showing it to everybody, and he showed it to me, and I was like, Jesus Christ. In my mind, I'm going, holy shit, right? This guy's going to be great. So I just told him, you know, and I told him, and I said, you're going to be amazing. And he goes, what do you mean? I've only done an outline, right? And I said, dude, just believe me. I just believe you're going to be amazing. You know, it's like
doing new things.
And it wasn't a new thing. It was just so well done. And so, I don't even remember what it was, but it was so different, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, and he exploded. And then he started, you know, entering competitions also. And I'm like, crap.
That's amazing.
Now I got to go up against Guy, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Around that time, you know, because, you know, there's new people on the scene, new stuff. Were you getting inspired by anybody? Like when you started changing it to Outer Limits, was there certain people that you were now getting inspired by, these newcomers at all? Was there anybody like that?
I don't know right now if something...
Can't really stand out on that right now.
I don't know. Maybe I'll remember something, but I do know that all these newcomers, when they come along and they're in any field, in any athletic field, in anything, these new kids come along and they're a step better, right?
Yes.
Step better. You know,
I think that happens.
Like it's Olympics
just
right
life.
now, right? So it's like, okay, new world record, new world record, new world
Yes.
record. It's the same thing in tattooing. These
I have
guys
a-
come along, oh shit, look what they're
Yeah.
doing. I have to get better. You know?
I have a theory about that too. I think that I feel exactly the same way, and I have a theory about it that is that, like, you know, this generation figures it out up to this point.
Yeah.
So you get to start out
Yeah, you
right
start
below that
right
point,
there,
and you're
yeah.
learning what they've already figured out, and then you
Yes.
get to go here. So
Yeah,
it's,
it's like here from my generation before me says, here's my knowledge.
yes,
Take this and move forward with it, right?
exactly.
And then my generation does it to the next generation, and so on and so on. So it's true. It's like, here's my word of knowledge, my book of knowledge. Add to it,
yes,
make it better.
yeah,
You know.
yeah.
So that's history.
It is, and that's
Yeah.
really cool. I think some bits get dropped off a little bit because there's things I see people doing now that
Yeah,
maybe
you
you
get
already kind of
forgotten.
figured out, and now it's not like
Yeah, well, they didn't know it happened already, so maybe
you like these tiny little
yeah.
things that people are doing, like little
Yeah.
mini portraits, and everything's in a
Oh,
whole
yeah.
scene. You know,
Oh
like
my
we
God.
kind of figured out, like, or you guys did that, like you were doing that stuff, and then you see it 20 years later, and you're like, okay, maybe I need to expand on that and
So my
give it a little more room to fade and
back
stuff.
up. My third tattoo I ever did was on my younger sister Kay.
Oh,
Right?
wow.
And
Yeah.
she wanted. I don't even know if you were aware of this. You were barely walking. You were not even walking.
I don't even know you tattooed her, so I'm not aware of it.
So she wanted this 50-cent size piece on her shoulder. She wanted a bluebird sitting on a branch with a tree in the background, little lake, all that, right? Okay, let me bust out my single needle and do this totally detailed, realistic color tattoo that big. And,
Yes.
And now it looks like somebody accidentally smeared chalk on her back. You can't
Yes.
tell what it is at all, you know. There's
Yeah.
nothing there, you know. And it held up for years.
It does for years.
Yeah, and then it's
But
just
then it's just gone.
Right,
Yeah,
it's totally
yeah.
gone. So
That
it's-
is one thing I see with the newer, and I don't want to go
Yeah.
too far forward into the future of stuff because I have so
No.
much stuff I want to cover with you. But it is one of those things that I think it got lost a little, you know.
Yeah.
And but it is. I mean, I think people are doing amazing stuff in that, right? I mean, I look at the pictures of it, I'm like, God, that's incredible, you know. Like, how did
It
they do
is.
that, you know? And it looks so lifelike and stuff. But I'm just like, you know, some things will be there and some won't, you know. And but it is crazy, like that you said that exact same thing, like, you know, the next level, people get to just progress a little. And I guess right now, you know, and I know this is more like present day talk with you, is, you know, I've admired so much how you've adapted, you know, and you changed things, and I see you getting inspired by new people, and your style is still very much the same, but it's changed, like, it's the same concepts, but it's changed a little bit. You know, and I think that's really, you know, I admire everything about you, obviously, but that's another thing that I'm like, oh, you never really like got stagnant and stopped, which I see a lot of artists do.
Yeah.
And you know, do you think that that's what all the artists you've worked with around the shop? You know, are they the ones that are pushing you, or is it the outside realm of, you know, or is it yourself? Like me, I think I get my most push from myself.
Okay, that's a great question, because I feel when I see really amazing tattoos that, yes, that's a pressure, right? It's a good pressure.
Yes.
Like they say, carbon makes diamonds, right? I
Yes.
don't know where I've heard that, but I've heard that. Anyway, that's part of it.
Pressure makes diamonds.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, pressure. So there's that, and then there's also the fact that there's so many tattoo artists around me. They're all different styles, by the way, so it's
Yes.
not my style directly, but you said it's within you, so it's definitely, and I've tried to pick this out of myself too, like where does it come from? Because a lot of people, you know, they learned in the 90s, they're still tattooing the same the way they did in the 90s. They tattooed in the 80s, they're still doing the same stuff.
Yes, I see a
right?
lot of that.
But they're also very similar, the same people that they were then,
Oh.
right? So there's that. So I've thought about this quite a bit, like why does my work change? And I think that a lot of times when I'm tattooing, I'm in my head, I'm just zoning out, I get in a really crazy zone when I'm tattooing internally, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you see it. I can't explain it. You just see it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you're like, oh, I should do that. And then the next
Yeah.
time you're like, wow, that worked. I'm going to do that, and you keep changing and growing. And I think some people can do that and some people can't.
Yes.
I don't plan it. It just
Totally.
kind of happens. It's like a lot of times I don't plan my shading. Like a lot of people, let's say I'm drawing something on. I'm going to use octopus because I draw those on all the time, right? But when I draw it, I just do a little bit, just to show where I'm going.
Yeah.
Right?
Because you got that pretty down now that you're like...
Whatever it is. I just put a few
Yeah, yeah.
lines, kind of general shape. And then as I'm tattooing, and I don't share this with many people, but people will say, well, how are you going to shade it? And I say, well, I don't know yet
Yeah.
until I start to go. And then as I'm wiping the skin, it shows me.
Yes. I do
Right?
that too. Yes.
Yeah. So all of a sudden you see this crazy shape and you're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go there. I'm going to
Yes.
do that. So it just happens.
And
as you're
sometimes
going.
it's like Bob Ross says, like happy accidents.
Happy accident.
Every
day.
Oh yeah, he makes a little thing, and he's like, "Oh, we'll just turn that into a little thing." And
yeah.
sometimes that works with, and
Yeah.
that is funny
It's
because
totally
it is a
true.
tricky question when people ask me that.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do with it? And I'm like, well, how do I even explain that? Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to put dark here and then light here and then I'm going to shadow. It's like a weird explanation they're looking for. Like,
Right.
you're not going to get what I'm saying, so why are you asking? Like.
So I maybe with your style, they're asking, where's the girl's face going to go? What kind of...
this is like after it's already like drawn on kind of thing.
Kind of...
Yeah,
okay.
you know what I mean? It's
All
like,
right,
well,
so
how are
they
you
got
going to...
the
Yeah,
rough.
and
How
it's
are you
like...
going to shade it?
Well, I don't really
I
know how
don't
to
know.
tell you that. Yeah, I'm just going to tattoo it. You know what I
But
mean?
you're really not sure.
Yes, you're not, totally.
Not sure.
Some people got it planned out to the T
Yeah.
when they sit down to tattoo, especially with these new kind of stencils where you can
Right.
see all the shading, which
Yeah.
is just paint line numbers to me.
I kind of do some of that too, because I do things where I'm working off a photo, but I don't do the whole arm that way.
Yeah.
So I'll, I'm working off a photo on, I don't know, let's say it's I go back to an animal of some sort.
Yes.
I got some kind of animal, but then while I'm doing the animal, I'm also picturing in my head, I'm going to have this negative swooping through here. I'm going to bring the trees in here. I'm going to bring this here. So in my head, I have the plan, but it's always there, right?
Yes.
And so, but I'm working part of it as I'm sketching it, and part of it I'm using a photo reference. Sometimes I use the photo reference, but I'll use like 3 photos of the same kind of thing and kind of put them all together, while I'm
Yeah.
tattooing, not in advance. But then there's some I'll make it the same. Like let's say I'm doing a ship, right? Maybe I'm going to change the ropes or the sails or something, but I'm not going
Yeah.
to change much else.
Totally, because you're doing photorealism, you kind of got to stay within your
Yeah.
boundaries of it a little
Yeah,
bit.
maybe I'll eliminate some of the detail, to make it
Yes.
last longer, something like that.
Yeah, that's
but-
great.
Yeah, but I try really hard not to copy.
Yes, yeah.
I try to change it as I'm
yeah,
doing
yeah. And I think you can see that in your work. That it still has an artistic
it. Yeah.
flair to it that's your own and not
Yeah.
just...
And some more than others, because some are more off of photos and some are more sketch it on.
Yes. And I kind of like came up with this too for myself is I'm only as good as the client lets me be.
Yeah. That's
Sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes people come in like hard as
Hard
nails.
nosed.
I want this there, that
Yeah.
there. This is how I want it. And you're like, well, that doesn't really work,
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you're like, oh, I suggest this. No. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
You're paying.
I want 5 bears in
Yeah.
the forest, and I want it only this big,
Yes.
And it's like, okay,
Yeah,
you try to
yeah.
talk to them, but a lot of people really, really, they see it and they're
They
like, well,
do.
this person did it, and so I try to explain, yes, and that looks amazing. It looks fantastic, but I'm trying to think about, if much as I can with the style that I'm doing, even though it's detail and it's black and gray, it's small, it's got a lot in there, right? But I'm trying to think how it's going to look 10, 15 years from now.
Yes. How's this going to age?
How am I going to
How's it
help it
flow?
hold up? So for a long time, And there's periods of my work where I'm like, ooh, I look back and I'm like, okay, that totally didn't work, you know?
Yeah.
It didn't work. It washed out too much, you know? So now I'm like, okay, I need to use more black. I need to back up black to negative, you know? Like in the old day, it has to have solid black. It has to have the lightest light and the medium, right? And you can't put too much in there because then everything gets confused. And you can't have everything have a pattern, because then your eyes are like, whoa, what's going on? So you got to have some flat areas, you know. You got to have some solid black in there, you know. And then you got to have some pattern. But if you put, you know, if you're doing Japanese work and you got pattern, and everything gets lost.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Or in any style, you know. Or all the shading is the same kind. So you have a tendency as an artist to shade. And everything in the thing does the same motion.
Yes.
You can't tell one part from another, you know. And some artists are like that, you know. That's their style. But for me, I try not to do that.
Yeah, that's really that's a great point. That's a good point.
Try to.
Yeah, and people can hopefully people can get some stuff out of that too, you know. That's really cool. Yeah, and I think you know what I'd like to do too now is like I'm thinking, you know, we're touching on like outer limits starting out and things, and I think is because your story is so long, I think we're definitely going to break this up into a couple, and I think that's a good like leave off point to maybe next time start with the outer limits era.
Okay.
And just kind of go from there into the future and talk new things even after that, you know, and where you're at now. But for people that want to know too, that maybe don't follow you or anything, what is your Instagram and where are you at?
So everything's under Kari Barba or Kari Barba Tattoo, right?
Is that easy? That's your IG page, is Kari Barba Tattoo?
Yeah, and I have a painting page too. I think it's Kari Barba Art, maybe. Gosh, look at that.
We'll
Tell
put the
how
links.
techie I am, right?
We'll put the links underneath too.
So a little painting, but the studio's called, you know, it's called Outer Limits. It's still called Outer Limits. There's 2 of them currently. I'm in Long Beach. And we could talk about
that too at a point.
Later.
Yeah, I think that's a good, that has a lot of history. There's videos of that too, so if people want to check that out before, but we'll definitely touch on all that.
Yeah.
Because that's a very important part of the story too.
Right.
And it's hard to sum up 42 years in a couple hours, you know,
way.
and I think we can get a lot into the 90s era of Outer Limits. There's a lot of cool stuff there to touch into, and there might be things we'll remember about the 80s era too that'll pop up, you know.
I
and
think so.
I'm just really enjoying doing this with you, and this means a lot to me, so I'm
it's
really
cool because I know, you know, as much as we see each other and live together a lot of our lives, we don't always talk about this stuff.
No, that's very true.
And I was at the shop and you were at home, or you were at the shop and I was at home, and a lot of it got passed around and didn't get talked about, so it's cool.
Yeah, because sometimes we'll touch on things and we'll start to touch on things a little bit, but when you got other family around,
and then
it's
we
kind of hard.
Then we got to make dinner.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard when when you got the whole family around. Some of them don't want to hear that shit, you know. And sometimes we're even just at the point where it's like, you know, we've been working like. I don't even want to talk about tattoo, you know.
Or it's a long story, and you're not going to get through it in a dinner.
Yeah,
you know,
it is hard sometimes just to talk about business. Like it's just like you know. But we work in separate places. You know, I'm in a private studio. You're in your shop, so it's and we did work together for quite a few years. Some people still come up to me and don't even realize that you're my mother. I know, which is pretty funny too, because I'm like, God, I feel like I put it out there, so I start posting more of that now, just to let people refresh again, you know. Because
it's funny because I have people. Is that your husband?
Yeah,
you know? And I'm like, okay, we got to have a chat.
Totally. We got to put this stuff out there more because people don't know, you know.
That's true.
So you know, I just think it's great, and I'm just glad we finally got to do this.
It's funny.
So thanks for coming on.
Thanks.
And thanks everybody for listening, and we look forward to doing another one.
Round 2.
All right, Mama. Thank you.